A hand was reaching out, trying to touch the many reflections of a pretty lady on the many lenses belonging to a metallic monstrosity. It was a very delicate-looking hand with fair, flawless skin ending with really feminine fingers and the final touches of perfect, methodically kept nails. It was not my hand, but yet it seemed to obey my every command. Every little twitch of fingers, any slight turning of the palm was reflected in those lenses. That hand never reached said lenses, a metallic appendage that was shaped into a perfect imitation of a human hand intercepted it. I felt the coldness of the metallic palm. Despite its outward human form, the hardness of its surface confirmed its non-organic nature. No signs of external injuries, but I detected your brainwave to be 70.865% deviant from your standard pattern. Are you well, SYRINE? This thing was asking me questions in binary beeps. How was I able to understand binary? Nothing made sense anymore, but the reflections on the monster's lenses told a cold truth, for reasons beyond my comprehension. I am SYRINE now. Then a realization struck me like lightning. This metallic monstrosity is acquainted with the Aquila lady. What if it learned I was not the real SYRINE but someone else who just took over? Severe stress took over and total panic was just a hair's breadth away. I needed answers and a way out. Do I have anything to fool this monster just for a while? Information. I need information. Do I know anything about it? Anything? Anything? Severe stress detected. Cogitatio acceleratio auto-activated. The world slowed again. The gunfight was still raging on but seemed so distant in the background. Another line of words appeared in my vision. Run Analytica? Yes/no. With almost teary eyes I looked at the prompt. Is this salvation? Yes. Readings popped up in my mind displaying information for the monster before me. Name, Cryptorecycle, Post-Human, Archtech Priest Dominus. I remembered now, this ginormous grotesque cyborg was definitely looking the part for an Adeptus Mechanicus Tech Priest Dominus. His overall appearance resembled a hooded and hunched gigantic man with multiple pairs of robotic arms. One of his many hands was carrying the signature omniscient axe of his order. Over what was left of his body was a hooded robe that was typical for a tech priest, and completing the package were his non-human legs which looked like a combination of inverted claws dangling with a bundle of random wires. On his back, a myriad of antennas and unknowable instruments stuck like pikes. The release of the Adeptus Mechanicus plastic range was a relatively new event compared to a lot of the armies of the grimdark universe. If I recall correctly, the initial start collecting box package was a particularly generous offer. In my zeal to quickly start up the army, I bought multiple boxes and ended up with a few redundant copies of Tech Priest Dominus figures laying around. As for those tracked monstrosities with human torsos and huge guns as arms around the Tech Priest, they were a mix of heavy combat units of the Adeptus Mechanicus known as Cataphan Breachers and Destroyers. These killing machines came in an expensive kit of 3 per box during release and were spammed by the power gamers. But enough reminiscing about my hobby, the current situation needs to be resolved. Digging hard into my mind, I reviewed my options given the absurdity of the current circumstances. Betting on the information gained from the reading, I started by saying his name, Crypto. I flinched at my own voice when it came out and did not manage to finish speaking his name. Unlike the one I was used to for decades, the voice that came out from me was elegant and feminine and it startled me. Old Crypto is here for you, omniscient princess. Please tell me, are you hurt or experiencing any discomfort? He canted. Eh? Not finishing saying his name was kinda a jackpot? Apparently, SYRINE was close enough to the tech priest to address him with a shortened name. Calling him by his full name might actually arouse suspicion that something was amiss. That was close, too close. But the next part made me shiver internally. I need to speak in low Gothic. If this was my old body, I swore I would have been sweating by the buckets. But there was no going back, the tech priest was waiting for me. One way or another, this charade will end with or without my answer, and I rather take an active bet. I had a hunch as earlier when the sister spoke in the language its meaning came automatically to me, so I dug deep into my mind for the low Gothic tongue. As if answering my prayer, the language suddenly bubbled into my head and the words came naturally to me. Putting in as much anguish as I could, I pushed them out. Where am I? My head is hurting. There, I said it in fluent low Gothic. To complete the act, I lowered my head to avoid his gaze and put my other hand on top of my head. The tech priest Dominus made a sound that was halfway between gasping and machine gear grinding to a halt. A slight pause later, a single word escaped his vocal synthesizer. Unacceptable. It was a crispy metallic voice laced with hints of age. I tensed up and waited, not knowing what would happen next. Wordlessly, he raised his massive omniscient axe and struck the ground twice with its end knob. Heavy resonance echoed throughout the whole chamber. All the breachers and destroyers stopped firing their weapons on his cue. The tech priest then turned his back to me to face the chamber, standing tall to his full imposing height and completely blocking my view. Then he roared, "Unforgivable. Inconceivable. You dare? You dare? None of you, not a single one of your misbegotten kind are even worth a single brain cell." The volume of his words, amplified many times by overcharged vocal synthesizer, drowned out all the combined sound in the chamber and everything paused. There the arch-tech priest Dominus stood tall at the edge of the elevated platform. He was looking down at all the hostile forces below like an apex predator surveying a herd of helpless lambs, one of his many hands pointing an accusing finger at them. I gasped internally at his blatant taunting at an armed and hostile crowd. "Hey, we are still in a gunfight. You are asking to be shot." As expected, since he made himself stand out so much, the tech priest soon attracted a whole lot of hostile fire, but he was completely unfazed as an energy field flickered to life around him to block most of the incoming fire. Small rings of light flashed on each impact on his protective energy field, making it a dazzling sight even when viewed from behind. The geek inside me cried out with joy and disbelief at the sight of a supposedly physically impossible force field in action. However, it appeared to not be foolproof as some rounds did make it through. However, those lucky shots merely bounced off him like rain hitting a stone wall. It was then I recalled a tech priest Dominus has some of the best defensive stat lines in the miniature game, outperforming even the premium power armor the Imperium provided for its elites, and I was merely witnessing that stat line performance live in action. With all eyes in the chamber on him, the tech priest continued, "As a devout believer of the glorious Omnissiah, I apologize for my unsightly outburst of emotion." He bowed and waved one of his many hands, dropping judgment with a voice cold with contempt. "Now, I consign all you unworthy unbelievers to eternal entropy." As every breacher and destroyer fired their heavy weapons, I realized with horror the tech priest must have done some serious trajectory calculations for his killing machines when he was trash-talking just now. For an undetermined amount of time, an endless stream of deadly shining projectiles was homing to the enemies below, and a scene of butchery happened right before my eyes. Cries of defiance soon turned into despair, returning hostile fire dwindled, then fell silent, and finally the Mechonicus heavy combat unit ceased firing. I took a peek at the carnage and saw the aftermath of the onslaught. Down there was a scene of sheer brutality. Scores of charred mass vaguely resembling human forms with twisted limbs littered all over the chamber. Some of them were still moving, but I was not sure if it was because they were still clinging to life or due to the random ammunition rounds and lasgun power packs that were still going off from the remnants of superheated weapon impact. The smell of ozone and burned meat filled the air. Wordlessly, the Battle Sisters started walking forward into the charnel house and executing anyone who might actually survive that hell. My civilian brain froze with the sight happening before me. "Holy Daughter!" A female voice called to me. I turned and noticed the sister leader was behind me with her helmet removed. Blood was pouring down from the left side of her face. My brain started to move again. The scene of her courageously trying to shield me from grenade impacts surfaced and made me instinctively look down at myself, only to see a flawlessly white robe, and my hands were lightly dusted but otherwise in pristine condition despite surviving grenade attacks and rolling on the ground. How was that even possible? I am all right. Thank you for saving me, but why do you call me Holy Daughter? It was the best reply I could come up with, as my mind was a mangled mess. Further adding to the difficulties of my mental processing was the eerie sensation of talking in fluent Low Gothic tongue which I have never learned. What the sister did next boggled my mind. She went down on one knee and knelt before me. "Revered Lady, I am Alicia Sabatith, probationary Palatine of Order of the Shining Beacon. You must be the prophesied true daughter of the Emperor that he unholy terror has sent to lead us in our darkest hour. Please honor us with your leadership and wisdom, guide our order and the people of Imperium in this testing time." I was rendered speechless, but she continued to speak. "The uprising suppression is at a critical stage. Revered Lady, please lead us." She looked up, Her face was a full display of hope and reverence, but my mind started numbing again with her revelation. "Uprising?" I murmured. Overwhelmed by what was happening around me, I merely echoed what Palatine Alisaya was saying. The truth was, my mind had blanked out a while ago. Around me was this supposedly real version of the grimdark universe of the far future, where I heavily invested in its miniature games as my hobby. I was awestruck by the sheer intensity of what I had seen, heard and felt, the smell of blood, sweat, gunpowder, ozone and charred flesh in the air, the sound of each and every gut-wrenching bolter discharge as the sisters continued their grim work in the background executing armed thugs. Indescribable feelings rose inside me. A part of me wanted to shout awesome. For what must have been a wet dream for any fan of the grimdark universe, to be able to see and experience the universe itself in person, another part of me just wanted to scream and hide from all these, as the very core appeal of this universe laid in the fact it was so utterly horrible and dystopian. And frankly, I wasn't sure this was a lucid dream session anymore. My mind just wasn't in the right state to answer the Paladine. Then someone cut into our conversation. "This is no mere uprising." A deep and stern voice came somewhere behind. The owner of the voice walked up and appeared beside me, and immediately I knew who he was by appearance. Standing close to 6 feet tall was a man who looked to be in his mid-40s. He was fully geared up with a trench coat overall. On top of his head was a really solid-looking capoton brandishing a stylized eye on the center. Beneath the shadow cast by the capoton, a pair of blue eyes glittered with sharpness and wisdom. Overall, the man was handsome but slightly rough around the edges and had the look of a model who would most probably be hired to represent a certain classic tobacco brand back on Earth. However, unlike your run-the-mill models, this man exuded an air of unquestionable authority even just by standing still. "Inquisitor," I said reflexively before realizing my mistake, and swiftly ran Analytica on the newcomer. The readings came back: human, Inquisitor. Inquisitors are one of the highest-ranking agents of the Imperial Inquisition. Relentless and deadly, they are the most important arm of the Imperial government dedicated to ensuring the security of the Imperium of Man. Every Inquisitor in theory possessed near unlimited authority, thus most have access to an almost limitless variety of Imperial resources that allowed them to act against any threats they perceived to the Imperium. Think of them as a mix of James Bond and Judge Dredd with a blank check to carry out their missions. Unlike Cryptora the Archtech Priest Dominus, no name came back, which meant Thabrus Thorn, Ordo Hereticus. He introduced himself and fixed a firm gaze on me. "You would have to excuse me for skipping pleasantries. Quickly now, can you tell me who you are and what you are doing on this planet?" "Honored Inquisitor," the Palatine voiced her displeasure. "I must protest the way you are addressing the revered lady, and what do you mean by saying this was no mere uprising?" The man scoffed. "First, before I can verify the outrageous claim you just mentioned, by the decree of the Holy Inquisition everyone here will be under my personal scrutiny. Second, when has a simple planetary uprising ever involved renegade Astartes?" He finished his statement by pointing somewhere below the platform we were all standing on. Astartes, aka Space Marines, were transhuman supersoldiers of the Imperium of Man. These genetically altered superhumans were usually clad in their signature power armor and engage in an endless battle with the horrors of the galaxy, widely known as the poster boys of the grimdark universe. But these supposed guardians of humanity can go bad, becoming renegade or something much, much worse. Speaking of which, whatever happened to the 2 Space Marines that were present in the enemy rank? I followed where the Inquisitor was pointing and found the answer. The heavy bolter Marine ended up in a pile of rubble, apparently melted together with his choice of cover after being subjected to hails of direct plasma fire. His hands were still twitching as a sister executed him with point-blank shots through the helmet lenses. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more gruesome for the renegade Space Marine, another scene was unfolding and it made my jaw drop. There, a short distance away, a dismembered figure of a giant armored man was being dragged along the ground by an unknown female figure clad in a skin-tight black operative suit. Her sudden appearance sent chills down my spine, as I had absolutely no idea when this person had entered the fray and chopped off all the limbs of a Space Marine. She was dragging the limbless renegade Marine towards us. Her every movement suggested highly trained lethality. From my knowledge of the grimdark universe, only one type of character fits her profile: an officio assassin or an operative or an Imperial assassin. Unlike all the operative miniatures I collected, she wore no headgear and exposed her pretty face to the world. The assassin was a cold foxy beauty with her black hair tied into a warrior's knot that extended into a long ponytail. This seemed like a really popular hairstyle in the miniature range. As I was dazzled by her appearance and couldn't help myself from looking at her, she glanced back, sizing me up, making my core shivered with her stares. "Sir, target acquired." She addressed the Inquisitor and pushed the hapless Marine forward as if casually delivering a mailed package. "Right, we should get this done and over with." He nodded to her. The assassin did something to the Marine's armor and then yanked the helmet off him. Underneath the helmet was the face of a scarred warrior with a bald head, but thankfully no signs of chaos corruption. Massive amounts of blood was pouring all over the place, but it did not stop the Marine from dropping a tirade of profanity in low Gothic. "In the name of the God Emperor, do you repent and cooperate, Space Marine?" Thabrus asked. The assassin held the Marine's head so he was facing the Inquisitor. "Ha!" The Marine snarled, "When my brothers arrive, they will give you all mortals a death not even worthy for street dogs." Then he spat, the classic acidic spit attack I read in the lore. As if anticipating this action, the assassin turned his head at the last second and his spit hit the floor and sounds of acid burning hissed on the spot. In a swift motion, she quickly followed up by dislocating his jaw to prevent further similar incidents. Now limbless and with a broken jaw, the Marine was making unintelligible angry sounds. It was at the same time the angriest and most helpless thing I have ever seen in my life. Not happy with his behavior, the assassin delivered some brutal palm strikes on the Marine's head to silence him with a knockout. "Now then," Thabrus continued as if the events just now were an everyday occurrence. "Put him away. Shall we continue where we left off?" He turned his cold gaze and looked at me again. I wanted to take a step back but my body couldn't move. All these individuals were just so casual about brutal violence. I had just witnessed more violence in person for the past hour than all my decades of peaceful life combined. A deep understanding of the laws of this universe was imprinted on me. Regardless of who you are here in this place, violent death can and will come to you anytime should you cross the wrong people or be at the wrong place at the wrong time. That realization seemed to have triggered some primal level of fear inside me. My mind had reached the threshold for the emotion, but strangely my body did not tremble, but mentally I was utterly spent and just wanted to surrender, so I came clean with the Inquisitor. I can't seem to remember anything. I just know my name and recall that Archdominus Scriptura is my acquaintance. The really surprising part of my statement was that my voice wasn't shaking, but inside I just wanted to cry. Well, judging by their reaction, that bombshell wasn't well received. The Inquisitor did not move and his expression could not be read, but that couldn't be a good thing. The sister had a surprised and devastated look on her face. Just as when it felt like things were about to explode, something buzzed. It was the same sort of sound I had heard a while ago. "This better be good," the Inquisitor said, but his mannerism indicated he was not speaking to me. As expected, he appeared to be listening to a Vox report via an earpiece and replied to someone a while later. "No mistake about it? Very well, keep me informed if anything changes. Thabrus out." With that, his attention returned to me again, and his level of hostility rose. "Quit playing games, lady, tell me what you did and why you did it." My patience has its limits and the latest development just escalated the whole situation. This was bad, really really bad. My instinct was urging me to do the totally illogical action of running away. They all had guns, and the assassin was just beside me. I was on the very edge of a nervous breakdown when a voice of reason came to my rescue. Inquisitor Thorn, Archtech Priest Dominus Scriptura, stepped in, physically putting himself between me and the scary man. As the highest-ranking representative of the Adeptus Mechanicus on this planet, I formally request you not to further burden my main benefactor of this holy expedition. The Inquisitor turned to face the tech priest and they started to stare down at each other. I gulped silently, looking at the two imperial powerhouses. My old habit as a gamer kicked in and I quickly deduced with a small comfort in the scenario if a fight indeed happened now. Scriptura and his killer machines had a slight edge over Thabrus' side. It was Palatine Alisai who broke the stalemate. Honored Inquisitor and Dominus, due to the unfortunate incident just now, the revered lady might have suffered from amnesia or brain damage due to the impact of the direct grenade attack. I had shielded her as much as I could, but it might not have been enough. The sister said apologetically, Both the parties she addressed looked at her bloodied face and contemplated her statement. It was at this point more people came forward and gathered near us. It was 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman who looked like what you would expect as the hired guns of the Inquisition. Theberus glanced at the group's most senior-looking individual, and the latter nodded, silently verifying Alicia's statement. Cryptora pointed at the impact craters near us and said, "Direct grenades impact. Even with her level of protection there might be complications with her delicate condition of just finishing the activation rituals." Inquisitor Thorn, we should put aside my benefactor's curious case of memory loss under review for the moment. In the meantime, what is this latest development you speak of? Archdominus. The Inquisitor turned to face the tech priest. I suppose my party does owe you gratitude for your cooperation on apprehending the renegade Astartes. As for that development, he said his next words slowly, this will affect every Imperial subject in this sector. Billions and billions of souls are at stake. I was just informed by my crew that the Astronomicon can no longer be detected. The light of the Emperor is lost to us.